welcome, you guys.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting, I think when we were kind of prepping this, we feel that we haven't spent enough time or enough discussion around understanding the Caribbean market. We've talked about the U.S. and what's happening, but we forgot that we have friends and neighbors that we should be discussing because it does relate to people do send traffic to the Caribbean. They don't see it as a separate, like going to the Mexico. So it's still +1. So Ron, maybe to help us, maybe you can kick off and tell me. You just came back from CCA and.
Yeah, we were at CCA, and we deal with a lot of the regional carriers in the U.S., so we're used to dealing with the regional carriers and talking to them about their needs and then going and talking to the aggregators about their needs. And we provide A2P to those CCA carriers in the United States. And we do work in the Caribbean. We work a lot with Alive, which is in the Bahamas, is where Alicia works. And just going over there and talking to them about some other products we do with them, but talking to them about messaging, you really understand that they have a problem that they need to overcome, and they're starting to overcome that in the Caribbean. And I feel like the Caribbean is underserved, and they're under-monetized, and they're not making the money that they should with A2P, and RCS kind of opens up some things for them to do. Obviously, WhatsApp is being used a lot in the Caribbean. They don't text a whole lot. They use their phones very differently than we do. And as you go over there and spend a lot of time there, you really see that they use their phones differently. They're mostly prepaid. They might take their SIM and put it in a competitor and 1 week and then have it in another phone the next week. So that's a little bit different and challenging when it comes to RCS specifically. But they use WhatsApp a lot, and we believe that RCS can turn that. And we also believe working with the carriers that we can educate and we can talk about what their issues are, let them tell us what their obstacles are, and then together we can present a safer and a trusted route so that aggregators can deliver to the Caribbean carriers better. And that's really what I wanted to talk about here and bring Alicia to talk about what they do at Alive and how we can improve in that.
Absolutely.
So yeah, Alicia, maybe to segue to, we have a couple of slides, so let me know when you want to show that to the audience. What's your perspective about the RCS and the opportunity of RCS in terms of enabling revenue growth in the Caribbean?
So the A2P market in the Caribbean, I'll speak more to the Bahamas, is a really big market. In respect or in perspective to global revenue opportunities, it is a little bit small. We'll discuss that a little bit. But just for some context for the audience, I know the Bahamas being here in the room may be a little bit new. So Kill Bahamas, we recently celebrated 30 years of operations within the Bahamas. During our last fiscal year, we netted $282 million in revenue. That's on mobile services and home connectivity services, fixed TV, internet. What we do service-wise, a lot of our business partners are in the room from an organizational perspective, so it's nice to connect in person. But what we want to take from this, from a value perspective, is just getting more stronger connections and maximizing our revenue opportunities. So we do operate in the A2P space. I can't really disclose those metrics in terms of our share of it, but I know, Ron, you have a few high-level metrics from it. But what we make and the business relationships we're able to negotiate, they're really on a smaller scale, and it's more so our size. So within the Caribbean, the Bahamas, we have about 400,000 residents. From a consumer perspective, on the mobile side, we have about 160,000 mobile subscribers. But when you look at the total market, when it comes to A2P and what is emerging with RCS, there's a lot of money that we aren't making. I know a few of you guys in the room, you visited the Bahamas on vacation, so we constantly have a high influx of visitors globally. That means all of the services that end-to-end is connected throughout this room and different networks in the mobile ecosystem forum, we are directly supporting at our organization. So not only the share of revenue do we need to increase a little bit, but also opportunities for us to leverage the connectivity when it comes to messaging.
And I think the cool thing is that in the Bahamas, there's 2 major carriers. And so if we can go to both of those carriers and talk to them about working, maybe not together, because I don't always like to do that, but if we can talk to them about, and I think Marcelo said it earlier, the water raising all boats, right? So if we can talk to them about working in cooperation with RCS and network APIs and just providing a safer environment for enterprises to come in and start communicating with their subscribers on both networks, then I think you're going to see a really big difference. And if we can do that in the Bahamas, then I feel like we can replicate that in other countries in the Caribbean, because we spend a lot of time going to all the different countries in the Caribbean, but I just felt like the Bahamas is a really good use case to start with, to bring network APIs in and RCS and to work on A2P. I think we had talked about the amount of money in the Caribbean. It's hard to find a number, first of all, so that's one thing. Dario's always looking for numbers, so I'm going to work with Canto, which is one of the big Caribbean groups, and work with them to get some better numbers. But about 200 million of A2P revenue throughout the Caribbean. But if you go with the amount of subscribers they have, the amount of money that they should be making in A2P, that number goes up to around 700 million. So they're really under monetized, and we're just going to find a way to get it back to where it should be.
So I want to make sure go to the slides a bit. Yeah, I think you talked about the growth. Anything you want to add to this slide?
Just it's more perspective, like I mentioned, in terms of revenue. I think we're about $5 per subscriber when it comes to A2P revenue, but we see the market is $1 billion industry. I also spoke to our last annual revenue is about 282 million. That's totally across mobile and fixed services. So what we are making versus the traffic that we do support, there's a share that is to be accommodated. Through some of the technologies in the room, like I mentioned, we can grow that a little bit, but the market will and is continuing to grow. And I believe the next emerging product is RCS in the Caribbean. There are some technology gaps and also regulatory that kind of create factors for us to be a little bit slower to adoption, but it is something that we want to tap into.
Yeah, and there's always been, not always, there's been a history of gray routes getting into the Bahamas. So a lot of the aggregators in the room are probably familiar with that. And we're really working to try to eliminate that in the Bahamas by, again, working with both carriers, finding out where that A2P traffic is coming from, where, when it's not supposed to be coming from there, turning gray to gold and all of those marketing cool things that you say. But we really are looking at how much revenue is someone like a Live sharing. And I can tell you from looking at not their numbers, but just in the Caribbean as a whole, if I look at my regional carriers, they're doing more in a day than a lot of the Caribbean carriers are doing in a month, right, as far as A2P that they're able to rev share with. And so it's really going to be a lot of work to try to go, okay, to the aggregators, we need to go down this route. We need to do this to make sure that everything is standard, to make sure that it's stable and it's a trusted route. And I think most people in this room want that trusted route anyway.
Let's see what we have on the next slide here. So Apple. So we want to talk a bit about that? Yeah.
Yeah, so we've been talking,
Android, Apple, iOS.
Yeah, through an agreement we're able to get carriers RCS ready. So we're doing some work with Google so that we can get carriers RCS ready, and that's RCS core, meaning it just works in their network. So P2P kind of stuff, right? But then on top of that, then you have RCS for business. And so as soon as we get them up and running for RCS, then we can go RCS for business. And so with Alive, we're talking about getting their network up and running for RCS when it comes to Android and Apple, so that we can have that ready. And then once that starts, then we'll work with you guys and get RCS for business revenue coming in.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think a good point that you mentioned is that interoperability, which is essential for these types of services. Within the Caribbean, there's always a competitive landscape. Everyone wants a larger share of subscribers. But for these emerging technologies to work, it's important that we all come together from a telco perspective to ensure that not only are we system ready, but we are consumer ready, because that's who we're really chasing with the dollars, in addition to the business side of it as well. But when it comes to handsets and devices, that means having the latest technologies from a network perspective. In the Bahamas, there is a lot of conversation going on about expanding to 5G. A lot of it is consumer handsets as well. We do operate in that retail space for consumer handsets, but there is a device readiness as well for these RCS capabilities that we're talking about. So there's a lot of work that continues to be done. I think overall, Dario shared a few of the metrics coming with the forecast for RCS revenue globally. There's a lot of money to be made, and we just want to ensure that we are equipped and ready to adopt when the market shifts.
And I actually think, too, that RCS and network APIs and those things will help just the Caribbean overall. I mean, with banking, they're an underbanked region as well. So with banking and having trusted communication with people in the Caribbean, I think it's going to help overall. So I think we're going to see that market grow as we get these emerging technologies in, and we want to be a part of it, and Alive is a part of it, and we're hoping that the aggregators as well want to be a part of it. And we'll be in the Bahamas talking to the government, talking to both carriers, talking to enterprises in that area to say, hey, what can we do to make your communications better, whether that's RCS or network APIs. We'll just be talking with them all and making that a better environment. And then, like I said, once we get done in the Bahamas, then we'll replicate that in some other places like Jamaica and those things. And also, we'd like to see an MEF in the Caribbean at some point, because we want to do that. So not just because it's nice. Miami's nice too. Don't get me wrong, but it would be cool to have an event in the Bahamas or something. So we've been talking with Dario a little bit about that and seeing what we can get done.
So I have a question. You talk about really unlocking the RCS and the network API revenue for the Caribbean market. I mean, that's basically where we want to achieve. I guess the question is, what are the things that have to be done? I mean, do we have? I mean, one thing that I feel that is essential is that the alignment across the Caribbean operators, among all the Caribbean, of course, maybe also alignment with the U.S. operators. So where do you see those discussion, alignment coming together? Yep.
Yeah, so it is going to be about getting the carriers to talk to each other and getting everyone at the table. So we will do that. We have a Canto, which is their organization, coming up in August in the Dominican Republic. So we'll get all the carriers there to sit down and kind of talk about it. You got to get through who has the best carnival and who has the best rum. But after that, we really want to talk about, getting RCS in, and really it's getting the network ready first. I think it's the first step. And so either us or someone will work with Alive on getting that RCS network operability ready so that they can go for RCS for business. And then it's just about talking to people and getting it on the network and sharing some revenue.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add to that, I think from a scale perspective within the Bahamas, from a technology implementation market readiness, we are a little bit more adept than some of the other Caribbean countries. Some of them have challenges when it comes to gaps, when it comes to 4G services, et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of being ready, I'd say we're a little bit ahead of the cusp, and I like to brag about that when I come to various forums like this, because the Bahamas, even though we're a very small market and a small country regionally, what we're able to do from a technology perspective is really advanced. We're actually rolling out fiber to the home throughout the Bahamas. We have about 700 islands and keys. So there's a really big lift. So those small wins like that for a country of our size is really good. So I think in addition to presenting some of this as Canto, where we meet a lot of the other Caribbean operators in the region, us just being the first to see it happen and see it through is a really great use case for these types of services and different ways to monetize. And I think it was mentioned earlier how the social instant messaging applications do impact our revenue. We do see it every day. We do make accommodations to ensure that we can better lock down and secure revenue opportunities from our subscribers. But with these new emerging technologies, which are emerging for us, well established in the US, I think it just creates more future-proofing when it comes to our revenue.
Yeah, and I have a follow-up question on that. I think from a demand side, from the customer, the enterprise, how I guess, I mean, your understanding of your market and how do you sell it to them?
Yeah.
And what are the use cases that is both on the RCS and even network API that you feel that the Caribbean enterprise, is it similar to what we are seeing in the US? And
Yeah, I think so. I think RCS for business is a really big untapped market. We currently rely on a lot of SMS for communications, like with banks, hospitality, healthcare, et cetera. Within the Caribbean, there are a lot of organizations that are across various countries. So, for example, we have certain banks. Scotiabank, for example, is a really big bank in the Caribbean. So those types of services, if implemented with RCS, it alleviates a lot of pain points. I don't know how many of you have visited Caribbean countries, but we tend to be very traditional in terms of the way business is managed. So they want to see someone, they want to talk to someone in person. RCS helps to foster that digital adoption. So you still get that quality of service, but you also get that reliance that I know this is a trusted business. I don't have to worry about any scammers calling me, versus visiting a bank in store or maybe getting some appointment made in office at a doctor's office.
Ron, any
Yeah, I
additional
think
thoughts on
network
that?
APIs with banks is great. I think the government communication, now the keynote talked about the price and how he has to worry about that price, and we'll talk to the government about that as well. You think of some things that happened during hurricanes and some other stuff, and are they using A2P, and would it be better to use RCS, and just what is that process is some things that we're going to be talking about. A lot of times, unfortunately, when a hurricane comes, I mean, it takes out some of the network, and you've got to get to those subscribers and talk to them. So anyway, we're talking to the government, and then we'll talk to banks and healthcare and all the major ones that everyone is used to. Yeah.
And Eddie, I guess a question on roadmap. Where both RCS and API, can you share any general roadmap of where you think things will? I mean, what will happen in the next 12 months or so?
Yeah, I think in the next 12 months, we should have either or implemented within the Bahamas. I think both of the operators, if I may speak for the other, we're pretty ready for it from a technology standpoint. Within our country, there are some regulatory matters that we are keen to adhere to. Those we really can't get around. They may vary country to country, but overall it's with the focus of ensuring that consumer protection is primary. But for us to implement some of these technologies, there has to be some leeway and allowances around that. So a lot of it, like Ron mentioned, is speaking to the government authorities to see how we can have our regulatory framework ready to implement these types of services where everyone benefits, which I think is the main part. So within the next 12 months, yes, I definitely do see RCS as a product that we are leveraging in our both consumer and business markets.
Okay.
Yeah, and same, right. So we'll hit it pretty hard after this, and then talk about going to enterprises and having those sit downs. And it's a quick 45-minute flight for us, so it's good to go over there and check it out, and and working with Alive, as we've been doing it for about 10 years now in some of our other products, and they are very aggressive and progressive, and so it's going to be great to start that project.
Okay. Maybe I'll open up to some question to the audience.
They just want the coffee break. It's fine. It is cold.
We're good. Any last thoughts? Summary, conclusion, next steps.
Thoughts and next steps, I guess. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of different organizations in the room that provide a lot of valuable services when it comes to messaging, and not just within the messaging world, but how your messaging technologies can be leveraged for telcos in the Caribbean, more so especially in the Bahamas. I would say if there hasn't been a reach out to our organization, Cable Bahamas or Be Alive, if you're not familiar with the name, please feel free to reach out to me. Let's see how we can connect and better leverage.
Yeah, and same. We wanted to highlight the Caribbean and just say that we think it's under-monetized and underserved, and we're here to help.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Ron. Thanks, Alicia. Appreciate the discussion.